With Trump and the internet's Sydney Sweeney meltdown, your privacy on the internet is dying, and YouTube, the UK, and AI might be the ones killing it. And this war in Texas over redistricting has huge updates, and it may be the single most decisive moment in the fight for democracy as it spreads to New York and California. We're talking about all of that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, starting with this. The Sydney Sweeney American Eagle Nazi scandal now involves the President of the United States. Because of course that's where we are today. So quick recap. Sweeney was in an American Eagle ad that said she had good genes. Or a double entendre about the jeans she's wearing and that she's good looking. But then you saw some backlash from people who said at best it was in poor taste to say that a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman had good genes. But then others taking it even further and saying that it was a clear dog whistle to Nazis. And then on the other side you had people saying this was another example of woke going too far, saying people were reaching here. But ultimately what you saw from American Eagle was they denied the accusations that they were being racist, and they doubled down, saying Sydney Sweeney has great genes is and always was about genes, her story. We'll continue to celebrate how everyone wears their AE genes with confidence their way. Great genes look good on everyone. And then over the weekend you had news breaking that Sweeney allegedly had been a registered Republican in Florida since 2024, which then resulted in reactions like she pretends to stand with women yet votes against their rights and freedoms, claiming solidarity while actively working against the very people she claims to support. We truly gave the spotlight to the wrong person. But then on the other side, you had some Trump supporters finding concerning that her address was possibly leaked, saying, does anybody else think that Sydney Sweeney's address being doxed on her voter registration for being a Republican feels like voter intimidation? Can't even be proud of your genes in 2025. But also, just the fact that apparently she's a registered Republican was enough to essentially turn her into a mascot for the right and used to bash others. With people arguing if you're a progressive celebrity, you endlessly lecture the public about your beliefs even if you offend half of your fan base. If you're a Republican celebrity who says nothing about politics, the left will hunt you down and hate you for it. But then there also being no shortage of people going, hey, look, here's Sweeney, a Republican, and then there's this other person that we're saying is not attractive. You know, all of that, it inevitably led to the President of the United States chiming in, which I know some people were like, I can't believe he's doing this, but also, really? And I say that for a number of reasons, including he probably wants people to talk about anything other than the Trump Epstein scandal. Though to be fair, he was first asked yesterday what he thought about her being a Republican.
She's a registered Republican? Oh, now I love her ad. Is that right? Is Sydney Sweeney? You'd be surprised at how many people are Republicans. That's what I wouldn't have known, but I'm glad you told me that. If Sydney Sweeney is a registered Republican, I think her ad is fantastic.
But then this morning he added to that in a massive post on Truth Social, saying Sydney Sweeney, a registered Republican, has the hottest ad out there. It's for American Eagle and the jeans are flying off the shelves. Go get 'em, Sydney. On the other side of the ledger, Jaguar did a stupid and seriously woke advertisement that is a total disaster. The CEO just resigned in disgrace and the company is in absolute turmoil. With him then going on to compare this to what happened with Bud Light after it featured Dylan Mulvaney, claiming that it tanked the company, and then he ended it with, or just look at woke singer Taylor Swift. Ever since I alerted the world as to what she was saying on Truth that I can't stand her, hate, she was booed out of the Super Bowl and became no longer hot. The tide has seriously turned. Being woke is for losers. Being Republican is what you want to be. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Also a note, this is the second time that he posted it because the first time he misspelled her name. But typo or not, seemingly the coverage here and the president chiming in, it caused American Eagle stock to jump. You know, all of this, it just makes me wonder what history books are gonna look like in 20 to 100 years. Because this war in Texas, it's spiraling out of control and spreading into California and New York and who knows how many states. It is going to be one of the most important things we see play out over the next 1 to 2 years. Because we're seeing the situation in Texas go off the rails right now, with Texas Republicans now chasing their Democrats into Illinois and threatening to put them in prison. With all of this starting last month when you had Donald Trump urging the Texas legislature to redraw its congressional map mid-cycle to give him more seats in the US House.
I think we get 5. And there could be some other states. We're going to get another 3 or 4 or 5 in addition. Texas would be the biggest one.
Or you had Trump ordering an aggressive gerrymander like he was ordering a milkshake at McDonald's. Which one, I mean, already kind of unusual, but especially unusual because 2, typically maps are drawn once a decade in time for the census. And it's only been 4 years since Texas last redrew its map. And so what did Republican Governor Greg Abbott do? Well, he called a special session to give Trump exactly what he asked for. And last week, they unveiled this proposed map that would likely add 5 new Republican seats, bumping the majority from 25 to 30 out of 38. But then on Saturday, a committee approving the map and the committee's chairman, Cody Vasut, not even trying to pretend that this is anything other than a partisan power grab. With him telling NBC this map was politically based and that's totally legal, totally allowed, and totally fair. You got states like California California, New York, and Illinois that have these really large margins between the percentage of seats they have and percentage of votes that they're getting. And Texas is underperforming in that, and so it's totally prudent, totally right for Texas to be able to respond and improve the political performance of its map. And so the state house was supposed to vote on the map tomorrow, but now that does not appear to be happening. Because yesterday, Democratic state lawmakers, they filed into buses and they booked it out of there, fleeing the state, effectively breaking the quorum that Republicans need to pass their map. And if you're like, wow, that's crazy, what the fuck is a quorum? A quorum is the minimum number of legislators that you have to have present for the chamber to vote on anything, which in Texas means 2/3 of the House. So that means that 51 Democrats need to be absent to break the quorum, and according to their own count, they've got 57 out of there. With some reportedly going to Boston and New York, but most they went to Chicago where they held a press conference explaining their decision. Gene Wu, the leader of the Democrats in the Texas State House, saying,
"We're not here to have fun. We're not here because this is easy, and we did not make the decision to come here today. We did not make that decision lightly. But we come here today with absolute moral clarity. Enough of your games. Enough of your lies. Today, the corruption of Donald Trump and Greg Abbott ends."
You then also had Representative Trey Martinez Fisher chiming in.
In America, we need to wake up. Republicans are stealing our democracy right before our very eyes, not on our watch.
You then had Representative Chris Turner really leaning in and saying that we have to do something.
They are engaged in an illegal act of intentional discrimination by tearing apart majority, minority congressional districts across our state. And we are not going to stand for it.
Right.
And then finally, you had Illinois' Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker saying,
all bets are off when the cult leader and would-be dictator of the United States tells Texas to midstream change the game when they know that they're going to lose in 2026. All bets are off.
Right, so very big moves here, very big statements, but then in response to this open act of defiance, you had Greg Abbott threatening the nuclear option, writing that Democrats hatched a deliberate plan not to show up for work for the specific purpose of abdicating the duties of their office and thwarting the chamber's business, alleging that amounts to an abandonment or forfeiture of an elected state office, and saying this truancy ends now. The derelict Democrat House members must return to Texas and be in attendance when the House reconvenes at 3 p.m. on Monday, with them then warning that any Democrats who refuse to do so will be removed from membership in the state House, with them then finishing, that empowers me to swiftly fill vacancies under Article 3, Section 13 of the Texas Constitution. Or in other words, he says, I'm going to kick you out and put new people in your place. Right, and that, notably, coming after Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton already threatened to arrest anyone who breaks quorum last month, with them even offering to assist local, state, and notably federal authorities in, quote, hunting down and compelling the attendance of anyone who abandons their office and their constituents for cheap political theater. A threat that's now been reinforced by State Representative Brian Harrison, who demanded of the House Speaker
immediately move for what's called a call of the House. The call of the House is what would authorize law enforcement to immediately be dispatched to arrest, detain, and bring back to the Capitol for the purposes of establishing a quorum these Democrats.
Now with this, it's unclear whether or how Texas Republicans could force the Democrats to come back. Right, there is legal precedent for state authorities compelling lawmakers to return to the chamber, but that's if they're actually in the state. And these Democrats, they cross state borders, so technically they should be outside of their jurisdiction. Alternatively, Abbott could seek their extradition from the states where they're hiding, and in fact, he just threatened to do that, alleging that the lawmakers may be committing felony bribery, which to understand where that allegation comes from, you gotta know that for every day that they're gone, each absent lawmaker racks up a $500 fine. So it would only take 2 weeks to go over their $7,200 salary. So you have Abbott saying that many absentee Democrats are soliciting funds to evade the fines that they will incur under House rules, and adding any Democrat who solicits, accepts, or agrees to accept such funds to assist in the violation of legislative duties or for purposes of skipping a vote may have violated bribery laws. There you had the Democratic leaders saying they're using legal ways to pay for their costs, but without going into detail. Though you had one political scientist telling the Texas Tribune, under Texas ethics laws, it's quite easy for some group to effectively just simply pay these legislators money as a form of compensation that they can then use to pay these fines. Let's say Mark Cuban wants to pay all these House Democrats $1,000 a day as consultants. They can do that. Also, the lawmakers can challenge the fines in court, with some suggesting that's exactly what they'll do, claiming civil rights violations, which is then why you have some saying that these threats from Abbott, Paxton, and such, they're just scare tactics to pressure the Democrats into folding. But for now, you have the lawmakers saying they're committed to staying away for at least 2 weeks, which would run out the clock on the 30-day special session. But then, after that, Abbott could just continue to call special sessions until Democrats come back. And right now, it's not clear how long these Democrats are willing to play play this game of chicken. Right? And that's a key thing here, because you have experts explaining that they would have to last until November, which is when the GOP has to pass its new map before filing opens for next year's midterms. But even then, you have experts saying that Republicans could just hold a second round of primaries if they miss the deadline. And I will say, if you look at history, the track record for what the Democrats are attempting, it's not very inspiring. For the first quorum break, it happened in 1870 when lawmakers blocked a bill giving the governor wartime powers, but they were arrested and the bill ultimately passed. The next one then came in 1979 when Democrats blocked a bill that would have shifted the timing of a primary in favor of one candidate. Though I will say, after a weeks-long game, a hide and seek between Texas Rangers and lawmakers in Austin, that one actually worked with Republicans pulling the bill. Then the next time in 2003, you had Democrats trying to block another mid-decade redistricting effort, and after a weeks-long standoff, they finally caved. And lastly, in 2021, you had Democrats trying to block a bill that overhauled election laws, but after 6 weeks, they gave up. Which is why many think that this fifth quorum break is going to follow a familiar pattern. Like the initial thrill and impact of the defiance, it wears off, the media stops paying attention, the social, legal, and financial pressure, it hits a critical mass. All while, these lawmakers are sacrificing their day jobs, their homes, and the time that they would have with their families to make this stand. But even if it doesn't pan out the way that they want, the fight is not over. And that is because we've seen Democratic leaders in New York, California, and Illinois saying that they are now looking at ways that they can redraw their own maps to favor Democrats. Today, you had the Democratic Legislative Campaign Committee calling on Democratic state lawmakers from around the country to prepare for carving up their states. Though, depending on the state, they might have unique rules that prevent them from gerrymandering as aggressively as the Texas GOP did. Like in New York, for example, although the legislature gets to approve its maps, they're actually drawn by a special commission. Though today, Governor Kathy Hochul said she would support an amendment to the state constitution abolishing the commission.
The majority of people in this state selected us, elected us to be leaders. And when we say that we cannot use that power to its fullest, then we're abdicating the responsibility that we all have. Republicans take over the legislature, they can have at it. But until then, we're in charge, and we're sick and tired of being pushed around. The playing field has changed dramatically. And shame on us if we ignore that fact and cling tight to the vestiges of the past. That era is over. Donald Trump eliminated that forever.
But if Democrats want to do that, they'll have to pass the amendment in 2 consecutive sessions, followed by a referendum, likely in late 2027. Meaning they won't be able to redraw their map in time for the 2026 midterms. Right, but then all of this it's important to note, it's not just Texas. Blue states, they're going to have to battle out red states planning to redraw their maps like Ohio and Florida. And so all in all, a lot is at stake. There is a long fight ahead. And a lot of it, I think it comes down to Democratic lawmakers understanding that the game has changed. And when your opponent is playing by a different set of rules, you adjust accordingly. And to not is just to guarantee your own defeat. And then you've got more news in just a minute, but first, do you know that moment when you open the fridge and all that's staring back is a sad pickle and expired oat milk? Because yeah, that's not a meal, that's a dare. And so instead of settling, I used today's sponsor, DoorDash, and more specifically, Dash Pass, to actually save money while getting what I want fast. You see, Dash Pass is DoorDash's membership that gives you $0 delivery fees and reduced service fees on eligible orders. Whether it's dinner from a favorite local spot or a quick grocery run you forgot to do again, Dash Pass makes life easy. It pays for itself in about 2 orders, and Dash Pass members save an average of $5 per order. You also get perks like 5% back on pickup, exclusive offers, and even HBO Max with ads on the annual plan. You can even add a household member for free because no one should argue over who's placing the order. And I've saved time, money, and sanity using Dash Pass. And if you're new, you can try it risk-free for 30 days. So get more from delivery for less with Dash Pass. $0 delivery fees and reduced service fees on eligible DoorDash orders. Sign up for Dash Pass today and get your first 30 days free if you're a new member. Subject to change, terms apply. Use my code PHIL50 or scan the QR code on screen to get started. A new law in the UK that requires ID to access adult sites has triggered a wave of backlash and a massive surge in VPN use. Right, in this law, it's reportedly already led to 5 million age checks a day. Though that's partially because it has a far bigger scope than just porn sites that need to verify ages. Essentially, any site where it is remotely possible to see adult content, they need to check IDs, right? And it covers, I guess, pun intended, way more than just naked people. Platforms where things like eating disorders or self-harm could be encountered, they need to follow the law as well. Meaning, essentially all of social media, and that includes YouTube. I mean, even Spotify users have to get their ID checked. And despite it today, the Online Safety Act, it might actually put users at more risk online in a number of ways. I mean, to put it simply, a lot of people just aren't really comfortable giving up their government IDs in order to access content online. Especially because, like, if you've paid attention to the news over the past decade or so, it feels like more of a when information is going to get leaked and come out rather than if. And so it's because of concerns like that that a lot of people have turned to VPNs at a staggering rate. I mean, just one example, the Swiss company Proton, they reported that their VPN had an 1,800% spike in daily signups after the law went into effect in late July. And of course, they're hardly the only ones seeing insane signup rates. And with this, I'm going to say something, and I'm also making sure that my sponsor in this space is not included in this episode. But it is very important to note that the turn to VPNs, it is not 100% safe either, because not all VPNs are built equally. Right? Some, they end up being little more than data collection tools of their own for big companies. Because remember, if the product is free, you're the product, which is why you have cybersecurity experts like Daniel Card warning many of these free VPNs are riddled with issues. Some act as traffic brokers for data harvesting firms. Others are so poorly built, they expose users to attacks. While more privacy-conscious users might stick to reputable services, the average person won't. They'll download the first free app with decent reviews, often without realizing they're handing over access to their data. Though also on the other side of this debate around VPNs, you've got people from groups like Internet Matters, which claims to be a children's safety group, warning that they might start looking at VPNs as well, and saying in particular they're concerned that it's too easy to get access to them in order to sidestep laws like the Online Safety Act. Right? But this world of ID checks and age checks, it's not going to be just limited to one place. And in fact, YouTube just announced in a blog post, over the next few weeks, we'll begin to roll out machine learning to a small set of users in the US to estimate their age so that teens are treated as teens and adults as adults. Right? And the program, notably, has already been rolled out in the UK because of the Online Safety Act. And it's expected to force similar requirements in Australia by December, when a ban on social media for people under the age of 16 will start. Which, as an aside, I'll add that YouTube's actually pretty pissed about that, because they were promised that they would be exempt from that, only for the Aussie government to go back on their word. You know, with this news, one of the big questions is, how is it going to look in practice? Well, it looks like YouTube's AI is going to rely on a ton of factors to guess a user's age to then cater what content they can access. So that'll include what type of videos they watch and search for, the general categories of the videos, and how long an account has been active. Right? And then if for whatever reason the AI is actually wrong about a user's age, there are ways to contest it, though at a steep cost to privacy, where you'll be able to verify your age with a credit card, government ID, or a selfie. Also, with this, there have been questions about how effective the AI actually is. Right, YouTube tested the feature in Australia back in June, and it was not guaranteed to be effective. However, I'll also say this is not an entirely new thing. Since 2021, YouTube has tried to actively figure out who is and is not an adult with things like the supervised teen accounts in order to cater appropriate content for them. You know, unsurprisingly, you have users concerned about what this is going to look like when it's rolled out, with some saying things like, watch YouTube's AI not even consider channel age when auto-flagging an account. Imagine owning an account/channel for 18 years and getting flagged for being under 18 years old because you watch too much Minecraft content. And that, as others asked, how is YouTube going to use AI to detect if a user is under 18 when it can hardly detect when a content ID claim is false? But also, some of the biggest concerns were just from the fact that YouTube will be collecting even more personal data on people. People saying things like, in theory, restricting child accounts instead of punishing creators is exactly what we need. However, requiring ID to use YouTube is exactly the bad solution, I fear. Also, it's AI. We all know how poorly that's going to work. Also with this, we saw interesting and controversial takes from the creator space itself, where big notable creators like Asmongold, for example, suggesting that there should be a government system that just verified information rather than letting every company collect their own. With them arguing Internet Real ID is inevitable, especially for social media. Denying this might feel good, but it is a lie and you know it. What isn't inevitable is private companies having access to our public records. The best solution is government. Authentication token that only verifies info. Also, understand when I say that was a controversial take, it was a take that was so disliked that people like Elon Musk and Taylor Lorenz found themselves on the same side. Right? Lorenz saying, oh my God, he is so impossibly stupid. You're against private companies having our data, but you think the government should have it? And you think the government having it won't need to contract with private companies to get that data? This man's brain is made of soup. And Elon Musk saying government is much worse than any corporation, or you don't understand government. Government is simply the most powerful corporation and with a monopoly on violence. But still, you had Asmon in a follow-up video criticizing how these ID laws are going to fracture the internet, doubling down.
You might not like this. You might not want to hear it, but if you're realistic and you take your fucking idealism cap off just for a second, you're going to realize this is true. We're going to have real ID on the internet. We're having this happen with social media. You had Spotify and you had YouTube too. And YouTube and Spotify are asking for your IDs now to make sure that you're not underage. And they have an AI checking system. So if you say it's lit or on God, you instantly get sent to YouTube Kids.
With him then going on to say that private companies shouldn't be handling this kind of information, and he referenced the T app, which was an app that was for women only and required photos and IDs to prove it. And to no one's surprise, that data got leaked, which jeopardized a ton of people. But while we wait to see how things develop and how things start to get rolled out. I'd really love to know your thoughts here. And then, next up in the news, this horrifying hostage video just reignited global outrage, and now Trump's demanding an all-or-nothing deal to end the war in Gaza. Because the White House and the Israeli government, they've been focused on negotiating a two-phase deal for a 60-day ceasefire in Gaza and the release of some hostages. But now, Trump's reportedly pushing for a comprehensive agreement that ends the war and returns all remaining hostages at once. And with that, you had White House envoy Steve Witkoff meeting with hostage families over the weekend and telling them President Trump now believes that everybody ought to come home at once. No piecemeal deals. That doesn't work. We think that we have to shift this negotiation to all or nothing so that everybody comes home. We think it's going to be successful and we have a plan around it. And it's been reported that Trump and Netanyahu are working on a new proposal that would involve presenting Hamas with an ultimatum. And under the terms of the ultimatum, Hamas would have to release the remaining hostages and agree to terms to end the war that include the group's disarmament. Because otherwise, the Israeli military would just continue its campaign. And in fact, we're also seeing reporting that Israel's preparing to expand its military offensive into additional areas of Gaza, with one official telling the Financial Times that Netanyahu's government was in dialogue with the Trump administration over the controversial proposal. Though notably, this is also as you have hundreds of retired Israeli security officials, including former heads of intelligence agencies, writing to Trump urging him to pressure Israel to immediately end the war in Gaza. With them writing, it is our professional judgment that Hamas no longer poses a strategic threat to Israel. But it's very hard to imagine that things are going to change in Israel, because the Israeli government, they have long maintained that the only way this ends is if Hamas is destroyed or it surrenders and gives up its arms. And Hamas, they've said that they're unwilling to do so, at least not without the establishment of a Palestinian state. And in fact, in response to Witkoff's comments, the group released a statement reaffirming this position. And that also as they released horrifying videos showing an emaciated hostage with his ribs and shoulder blades visible through his skin. And that came just a day after another group, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, released a similar video of another hostage. And those videos, of course, sparked international outrage and concern for the 20 remaining hostages believed to still be alive, with thousands also protesting in Tel Aviv, calling for a deal to secure the release of the remaining hostages. And then, in response to calls for the hostages to be better cared for, you had Hamas saying yesterday that it was prepared to coordinate with the Red Cross to deliver aid to hostages, but only if Israel permanently opened humanitarian corridors and halted airstrikes during the distribution of aid. And, you know, one of the key things with all of this is that the group seemingly was trying to use this to draw more attention to the whole dire situation in Gaza. But I mean, even in one of the hostage videos, it actually said, they eat what we eat and drink what we drink, and mixing in images of what appear to be starving babies and children in Gaza. Because to be clear, as we've covered on the show, children are dying of starvation in Gaza. And I mean, you have the world's leading body on hunger, the Integrated Food Security Phase Classification, or IPC, saying last week that the worst case scenario of famine was already unfolding. Or with that flying in the face of Netanyahu claiming that there was no starvation in Gaza at all. And that is, you've got countless experts saying, in reality, it's his government's policies that have created the situation, with everything only getting worse since the US and Israeli-backed Gaza Humanitarian Foundation took over most aid distribution in Gaza. But the group's only operated 4 distribution sites, mostly in southern Gaza, whereas earlier in the war, hundreds of aid distribution points were active under the UN-led system. And that's without mentioning that hundreds of Palestinians have been killed near these sites trying to access aid, including at least a few dozen over the weekend. Now that said, the UN and other aid groups, they've still been delivering some aid since the HGD launches operations, bringing supplies by trucks to both northern and southern Gaza. Notably, most of the trucks have failed to reach their destinations, with hungry people intercepting them often minutes after they enter the territory and grabbing whatever aid they can. Also with this, some have jumped on statistics showing this to argue that Israel was right all along and saying that aid's being looted. But to be clear, Israeli military officials have themselves said that the military has found no evidence that Hamas systematically stole aid from the UN. And internal US government analysis similarly found no such evidence. And so it appears that the situation is just so bad now and that the aid is so little that you have desperate people doing what they can to get anything. But then with all that, while we're seeing Israel and Hamas really not budging on anything, much of the rest of the world, they at least seem to be trying to do some hard thinking. Right, and so last week you had France announcing that it would formally recognize a Palestinian state in September, with also the UK saying they would too if there was no new ceasefire deal, and several other countries have indicated that they might just do the same. And in fact, dozens took part in a conference at the UN signing a declaration supporting the idea of Palestinian statehood and urging Israel to commit to a two-state solution. And very notably there, you had the 22 members of the Arab League among those signing the declaration, calling for Hamas to lay down its weapons, release all hostages, and end its rule of the Gaza Strip. And having the world's Arab nations join in on that, that's unprecedented. But of course, you know, it remains to be seen whether all of this talk turns into any action or actually gets any results, especially because it'll be hard without the United States on board, which very much appears to not be. I mean, the Trump administration, along with the Israeli government, boycotted the conference. And Netanyahu, he's repeatedly rejected the idea of a two-state solution, right? I mean, you have members of his government not even trying to hide their view that Israel should just take over the Palestinian territory. I mean, just this weekend, you had the country's national security minister sparking outrage by praying at the most contested holy site in Jerusalem, which is now home to a mosque, with him saying in a video of the visit shared by his office, it's important to convey from this place that we should immediately conquer Gaza, exercise our sovereignty there, and eliminate every last Hamas member. And on top of that, you have Netanyahu doing everything he can to consolidate power at home, with his government even voting today to get rid of the attorney general who, hey, just so happens to be the chief prosecutor in Netanyahu's ongoing corruption case. And while we wait to see what happens with that, I mean, what we do know is that what's happening there, it is shaping politics in the United States as well. Where this new Gallup poll that got released, it found that support for Israel's military action in Gaza, it is at a new low, especially among Democrats whose support has now dropped to just 8%. And while not showcased 1-to-1, I mean, we're seeing politicians shift as well. And just last week, we had a record number of Senate Democrats supporting a resolution to block new arms sales to Israel. And in fact, even staunchly pro-Israel Democrats, they're criticizing the Israeli government. With even Richie Torres, for example, saying, all parties, including the US and Israel, have a moral obligation to do everything in our power to ease the hardship and hunger that's taken hold in the Gaza Strip. And saying, I feel it's possible to be an unapologetic Zionist while at the same time recognizing there's a crisis in Gaza and recognizing the war has poorly defined strategic objectives. But a lot's still playing out, and a lot that we're gonna have to talk about again soon. And then next up in the news, we gotta talk about the chaos that's unfolded since the Friday jobs numbers. Because Trump, he fired the official who told him that the job market wasn't doing well, and he says now that he wants his own people telling him how it's doing. Because if you didn't see, the Friday jobs report, it showed that just 73,000 jobs were added last month, and that 258,000 fewer jobs were created in May and June than previously estimated. And so in general, those numbers suggest the economy has weakened during Trump's time in office. And that's also in line with other key economic indicators, including a slowdown in economic growth during the first half of the year, as well as an increase in inflation that seems to be driven at least in part by the tariffs. But Trump, he says the economy is actually doing better than ever, and obviously these numbers, they must be fake, which is something that he claimed in his post where he called for the official, the director of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, to be fired. Or with him also claiming that this official, a Biden appointee, faked the jobs numbers before the election to try and boost Kamala's chances of victory. Saying in another post, in my opinion, today's jobs numbers were rigged in order to make the Republicans and me look bad. A total scam. And he's actually continued posting about it up until today, referring again to Friday's revision as well as the revision around the time of the last election, and saying those big adjustments were made to cover up and level out the fake political numbers that were concocted in order to make a great Republican success look less stellar. But of course, they weren't made up when they were good. In June, when it was initially reported that the economy added 139,000 jobs, he posted great job numbers, stock market up big. You know, while looking into it, while the firing here is new, the him calling stuff out like this, that is not. He's actually often attacked the jobs numbers as they showed the unemployment rate going down under Obama, only to immediately switch to praising the data once he was in office and job growth continued. With all that said, right, this latest revision, it is especially big, and if you're wondering why, well, for one, it may be explained by Trump's economic policies being especially erratic, but two, like the revision with these numbers, that's actually extremely normal. In fact, every monthly jobs report includes revisions to the prior 2 months' figures. And those revisions, they happen as the government receives more responses from businesses to its survey, which is used to provide a more complete picture of employment trends each month. And what we've seen is in the past decade, companies have taken longer and longer to respond, which may have contributed to larger monthly revisions. Which is why with that, you had a group that includes 2 former BLS commissioners, including one who was appointed by Trump to the position, condemning the firing. Saying in a statement, the rationale for firing the commissioner is without merit and undermines the credibility of federal economic statistics that are a cornerstone of intelligent economic decision-making by businesses, families, and policymakers. We also had a former Treasury Secretary saying there is no conceivable way that the head of the BLS could have manipulated this number, and saying this is the stuff of democracies giving way to authoritarianism. And yeah, just to throw my opinion in there, I don't know what else you call it. I think it's putting it lightly to say that he has a tendency to try to suppress facts and push his own alternate reality. And when you're looking around now, or you're looking back in history, that is a staple of authoritarian leadership. Right? And with Trump, I mean, when an intelligence report contradicted his views, he fired the analyst. When experts said that his tax and spending bill would increase the deficit, he made up his own math. And beyond that, he's wielded the power of the White House to try to remake the global trade system and control media companies, universities, and Congress's constitutional power of the purse. Right? And just like all these individual stories, this one, it's part of a much bigger story that's happening here. And that, my friend, is where today's show is gonna end. And well, of course, I'll see you right back here tomorrow with a brand new Philip DeFranco show. If you missed it over the weekend because it's new, I got 2 brand new videos for you. One where I handed the wheel over to you to answer your questions and dive into news that you wanted. 2, I put out a brand new episode of In Good Faith with Philip DeFranco, and I had Brian Tyler Cohen on. It's a great watch right here on YouTube. Links to those in the description. But hey, stay safe out there, stay sane out there, and I'll see you tomorrow.